Very good morning and welcome back to yet another session of retail management. Before we proceed with today's topics, let's quickly take a look at what is it that we did in the previous session and then continue from thereafter. Allow me a second. Let me quickly share my presentation. And here we go. We've started module number 2, where we are going to be focusing on the retail strategies. Now, when I say retail strategy, this particular topic is going to comprise of various strategies, beginning with consumer behavior related strategies, touching upon the locational strategies, visual merchandising, and several other dimensions when it comes to retailing, right? And we began in the last session, we began with a brief understanding about retail consumers. We saw what are some of the changes that have occurred post pandemic, which continue to evolve to today. And this has in a lot of ways forced retailers to re-evaluate their own operational as well as marketing strategy when it comes to retail management, right? We looked at several forces that influence consumer behavior and how that influences the consumer's buying decision-making process, right? We looked at some of the models of decision-making processes, how the linear understanding that we had in the past has evolved over the years due to several forces that are acting, which has made the buying decision process itself a very non-linear one, therefore making the entire marketing exercise generally complex, if not complicated, but a rather complex one. We looked at some of the, of course, the presentation comprises detailed explanation of all of these stages, along with some examples for you, including some numerical examples to substantiate the discussion. We also saw how it has increasingly also become important to manage post-purchase behaviors of the consumers, right? Then we went on to look at some of the different types of consumer decision-making processes. We saw 4 of them, and something very interesting, particularly in retail, called as the dissonance reducing buying behavior, and how is it that marketers can address the dissonance that arises out of uncertainty. We looked at one example, although the presentation has 3 examples for you, but then we have enough time to in detail discuss only one. Therefore, in the last session, we looked at some of the, or rather one of the very prestigious retail brands called as Louis Vuitton, a French brand, but then of course has gone on to become a global name, and has become an a name that really personifies luxury, right? We saw several strategies and some of the technological innovations that this brand has made over the years, becoming one of the very respected names in luxury marketing, right? And a brand that usually other brands look up to for, if they're looking for a marketing inspiration, then of course there are some leading brands, and Louis Vuitton is one of them. The presentation has an example of Starbucks as well as Snapdeal from an Indian context, of course. You will be able to see some of the good as well as bad moves that this brand made, leading to its downfall as they are here today. Okay, so the next topic that we will be touching upon is retail site selection. And then this topic is something that we are going to be examining in detail. Now, for a brick and mortar retail store, it has become increasingly important to select a retail site that not only stands and resonates with the brand name of this retail setup, but then is also able to address several complexities associated with opening a brick and mortar store, right? So let's look at different types of retail locations and then look at how each brand goes about, by which time you would have got a fair understanding about how every brand goes about this very critical decision in retail to do with site selection for a brick and mortar store. There are three categories under which we are going to be examining the different types of retail locations. Unplanned areas is the first category, followed by planned areas, and then we have the last category, which comprises of a lot of these hybrid locations and some of the newer kinds of locations that have emerged over the years. Now, when it comes to unplanned locations, we look at freestanding locations as well as CBDs. Now, what we have to really understand is that some of these terminologies may not be very specific to an Indian context, right? But these are very, very commonly used terminologies globally. Therefore, we are going to be taking a more broader outlook when it comes to this particular discussion and not necessarily pertaining to an Indian context. However, we will see a lot of examples as we go along that might be relevant to the Indian context as well. Now, when I say freestanding location, under the first category of unplanned, these are essentially locations that are otherwise not planned to be locations for retail outlets. For example, it could be a location on the side of a highway, isn't it? On the side of a highway, one wouldn't really expect someone to open a retail shop because obviously the foot falls from pedestrian traffic is hardly any. And some of these express highways these days do not even let you stop your vehicles. So these are not necessarily meant to be retail locations. However, because of logistical advantages and the kind of store that is, these freestanding locations are preferred. For example, IKEA elsewhere in the world, they've had a preference for locations that are slightly outside of the city limits, and usually you will find them on, on a highway or something like that. Why? Because their preference for larger, humongous superstores, and then secondly, because of the nature of product that they sell and the kind of volumes that they sell, it's easier for somebody to drive into the store, pick up everything, dump it in the car, and then drive back. So city locations weren't found to be very useful for IKEA outside of India. But of course, when they entered the Indian market, things were set to really change for IKEA because this model didn't work. And then they were forced to look at smaller outlets within the city limits to cater to Indian audience. That discussion is for a little later, but freestanding sites are out parcels, usually where your stores are located. For example, in India, you have your KFCs and McDonald's that are located on the highway, or for that matter, your dhabas and things like that are also a good example of these freestanding locations that primarily cater to vehicular traffic. And then you have kiosks also that could be considered as part of your freestanding sites, right? And then you have something called as CBD, Central Business Districts. Well, every city has these, but then may not necessarily be termed as CBDs. But then every city has this heart of the city where probably the history of that city would have begun. For example, the city where I am teaching from, Pune, we have the central part of the city, which surrounds one of the oldest forts in the city. Probably is also the thickly populated parts of the city where you will see a lot of these stores that have been there for several years. For example, if it could be, people's into wholesale garment sales, or it could be any of those bookstores, etc. You will find that these are places that are very thickly populated, and this is true no matter what country or what city we're talking about. But then there is a difference. If you were to compare it with, say, a country like US. Now, those also have these thickly populated city centers, but then these are areas where mostly there there are a lot of businesses that operate from. There are a lot of corporate companies that have large setups over there. And you will find that although there may be housing units or housing complexes there, those are not really preferred. For example, in the US, and then, people prefer to, at least those that can afford good housing and expensive areas, prefer to stay outside of the city limits. Outskirts are what are preferred, at least by people with high net worth and those that can afford. So you will find that suburban houses are more expensive as compared to the city center, which might be very different in India. Those that are in the center of the city sometimes also are very expensive, right, as opposed to out parcels of the suburban areas. So there are these differences, and you will see that usually city centers, because they're also the oldest parts of the city, these are unplanned. So you will not find these places especially developed to cater to retail businesses, but then these places would have developed organically over the years. There are, of course, advantages and disadvantages. We have to understand that these are country specific and cannot be something that's applicable to every country, right? So, in the presentation, you will see a lot of disadvantages and advantages described there. Please read them in your own time. And then, of course, you have neighborhood and community centers. These are, again, very popular in some parts of the world, right? Community centers are very commonly seen in the US, at least, you know, I am talking purely out of experience of, being to these places. One of the places that I remember going to in Atlanta, Georgia, is a community center, which is more of a shopping complex of sorts, right? Where you would find that there were places or stores that sold specific items relevant to a country. For example, the one that I went to was a very popular community center for Southeast Asians. And the time that I went to, it was the Vietnamese New Year, so there were decorations very specific to Vietnamese New Year. There were a lot of goodies being sold for the New Year, and then there are also these spaces where people can get together and then party and things like those. Again, these places are very common and very popular among retailers that sort of resonate with the thematic area of that community center. And then also in an Indian context, in the city of Bangalore, you will find that the Bangalore Development Authority developed these BDA complexes, as they're called as. And then these would typically serve as places for retailers to not only open their stores, but then there would be small little offices. And there would also be help desks of the government where, the corporate municipal corporation, where people could go and voice their concerns, etc. So these are community centers, and again, very, very geography specific, something that you would not find in every place. And then there are power centers, for example. These are, think about Walmart, Target, Toys R Us, and then some of the largest, you know, hypermarkets coming together in one place, all these supermarkets put together in one place. That is what a power center is. And is it very common? In the US, yes, of course, very, very commonly found, because it's a very big country. So, in terms of land availability, it's not a very difficult thing for them to put together places like these, as opposed to, say, a UK or a France, which are smaller countries, and it's difficult to imagine power centers like these in smaller countries, right? And then, of course, we have enclosed shopping malls, the ones that we are very familiar with. Why do we call them as enclosed shopping malls? Because we saw power centers, and these are usually open air. You will not find high rise complexes here, but then these are spread out geographically, and you will find a lot of stores in one place, right? And then usually they are just one or two floors each, as opposed to enclosed shopping malls, which typically you will find everywhere. if there's one country that has perfected the art of building beautiful malls, it has to be Dubai. For those of you who've been there, I'm sure you must have gone to the Dubai Mall, which is the mother of all shopping malls. And of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to having stores there. In a mall, one is almost assured of foot traffic. However, there could be disadvantages in terms of higher occupancy costs, etc. Right? And then, of course, there are lifestyle centers. Lifestyle centers are very theme based, For example, if you were to look at some of the high-end luxury malls that we have in Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, for example, the Palladium in Mumbai, etc., or DLF in Delhi, right? You will find that specific kind of brands typically tend to have stores over there. And then you have fashion and specialty centers. One of the examples that I could give you again is of your Palladium in Mumbai or Emporio in Delhi or the collection in Bangalore. Again, these are very specific. When I say not just high end, but then also very specific in terms of fashion retail, right? These are again some of the examples for you. And then you have outlet centers, again, a very American specific concept here. Now, what are outlet centers? Outlet centers are where you will find that premium and luxury brands usually have their shops. But then what kind of shops are these? Why do we call them as outlet shopping centers? We call them as outlet shopping because although these are premium brands, this is where they usually sell their previous season discounted merchandise. In fashion, um, of course, we know that there are two different seasons, and fashion industry generally is, governed by seasonality. We have the summer, spring, and then the autumn, winter collections. And a lot of people don't want to wear anything that's previous season, right? So therefore, the shelf life of fashion retail is limited to that particular season, at least in very season conscious markets, right? So therefore, anything that's previous season, these brands, sell out that particular merchandise from the previous seasons at a very, very discounted price. Sometimes they range to 50, 60, 70% even. Some countries don't really worry too much about season. That was the case earlier in India, but these days, even Indian consumers, particularly women, are becoming very season conscious and have reservations against wearing anything that's previous season, right? And then, of course, we have theme or festival centers. These are, themed malls. For example, the Ibn Battuta Mall in Dubai, you will see that it has 7 or 8 different sections, and each of these have an ambience very specific to that theme. For example, the Arabian theme or the Egyptian theme, and all of those, right? And you will find typically stores either of that region or the stores that sell things that might be relevant to that particular theme. And you will find restaurants and everything that really resonates with that particular theme. And then you have omni centers or mixed development centers. These are all, this is like a combination of enclosed malls and power centers and lifestyle centers. These are usually very mega establishments, something that you would typically find in US. And then, of course, airports, right? The duty-free shopping, something that's very attractive. Why? Because you do not pay the taxes in duty-free shopping. So airports, again, have become very attractive for a lot of brands that can afford to have a store in airports, because the rent that one would have to pay or the lease that one would have to pay for airports is very, very high. Therefore, typically you will find that only high-end retail brands typically opt to have stores at the airport. But what's the biggest disadvantage? Heavy assured pedestrian traffic 24/7, because airports never sleep. So shopping, of course, is something that happens 24/7 at the airports. And then you have pop-up stores. I'm sure you know what pop-up stores are, right? These could be on land, these could be on the cruise even, right? These could be, something outside of a restaurant, something in a mall. These are temporary shops that are set up. Now, is it only the regular retail brands that are into pop-up stores? Hardly so. You will find that even some of the luxury brands today don't have any reservations against setting up pop-up stores. But again, the place where they set up the pop-up store is something very important. So they will look at locations that resonate with the brand and that align with the brand strategies that those particular brands, and then we have, of course, these resorts. Some of these high-end resorts, high-end hotels have become very choisiest of locations for luxury brands to open their stores, right? One of the examples could be St. Regis in Aspen, very popular among the rich and famous, especially during the skiing season, the winter season. This place is very popular among skiers. A lot of them travel to Aspen to enjoy, and then St. Regis is one of the very popular luxury resorts over there. So you will find a lot of luxury brands setting up stores. Store within a store is another concept where you have these mega stores, and then within those mega stores, smaller stores might either set up a permanent setup or have a pop-up store, right? um, and then, of course, you have your social networking sites. I need not talk about how, Facebook and Instagram have become more about retailers or people trying to sell something or the other and less about networking. But unfortunately, or fortunately for us, these uh, social networking platforms are excellent for doing brisk business for small retailers even. Not just social networking platforms, we've of course seen how social networking platforms today are promoting different kinds of experiential shopping ideas, right? We've seen that in the first module, so I'm really not going to repeat here. But not just that, even gaming platforms have become an attractive platform for retailers. We've seen something called as gamification of retail experience, or sometimes also it's known as competitive socializing, where friends can get together on that platform, not only play, of course, the game, but then there are opportunities to spend their coins or whatever that they earn, in buying things from the retail store, right? We've seen some of the most respected brands like Burberry, which is a very well-known luxury fashion retail brand, also engaging in competitive socializing. And what's even more exciting is that they've been able to seamlessly integrate brick and mortar experience into their online shopping to create those competitive as well as socializing shopping experiences. And there is a very good news article in module number 1 in this PPT. I would really recommend that we read that article. And then, of course, there are a lot of these D2C business models, home-based retail stores, right? We know that a lot of people post-COVID at least were able to successfully launch their home-based retail stores, which have gone on to become very successful businesses. Of course, there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages to these locations. Okay, now I have an exercise for you in the presentation. I would urge everyone to spend the next 5 or 10 minutes doing this exercise, or maybe whenever you have the time. In this exercise, what I really wish you would do is, assuming that you are looking at setting up a sports apparel and athleisure apparel brand, I would want you to think about your own city and then come up with, say, several factors that you would consider before choosing a store site, right? It could be in Pune, Delhi. If you're in Delhi, it could be your Khan market. But what you have to really be able to justify is, if you're choosing Khan market, why? Is it because of the demographic mix? Is it because it resonates with the brand that you're trying to market? Or is it because you have assured footfalls into the store? Whatever those factors that you are considering, please make sure that you are listing all those factors on a piece of paper as part of your exercise, right? Okay, so while you do that exercise, let's quickly move on to the next topic and understand what are these factors that we are talking about when it comes to retailers' decision to select a site for their brick and mortar store. Primarily, there are four governing factors. First, of course, is a strategic fit with the market that you're catering to. If you are a luxury retail store, then you know that you're obviously going to be targeting high net worth individuals. When you open a store, you would definitely want to see what's the proximity between your store and then the locality or the area where these high net worth individuals might be living. Now, I am not saying that they are all there in one place, but all I'm saying is, are you located in a strategic location where it would be easier for your consumers to access your store? So it's very relevant that you are located strategically closer to your target market. Not only that, the location itself must be able to resonate with your brand, right? So you cannot be a luxury store and then set up store next to, let's say, a coffee shop, or next to, let's say, a coffee day, because then really who your neighbors are in terms of a retail location is also something that matters. I see that someone has joined in. If you can please mute yourself. Yeah, if you can mute yourself, please. Yes, thank you so much. Right. So it's very important that the store itself has a strategic fit with the audience that it's trying to cater to. And then secondly, the competition. While it's important to base your decision of location based on where your competitors are located, you would want to think that if my competitor is operating out of this area, probably I should look at a different area. But then, hey, wait, there are some theories that suggest that it's also beneficial to be located right next to your competitor in some cases. We'll look at that as we go along. But yes, you will certainly have to keep your competitors in mind before you choose your location. And then certainly prevailing economic conditions in the country also play a huge role. Are there any recessionary conditions prevailing at the time when you're planning to open your store? Then you might want to choose a very expensive location, a very attractive, very popular location. But then if the economic conditions are recessionary, then really you're spending a lot of money on choosing a very high-end location where the return on income might not be assured, right? So it's also very important to understand the external and controllable factors. It could be economic, political in nature, even socio-economic in nature before you choose a certain location. And then cost of operating the store is another critical factor, right? For example, you may think that, locating the store on a highway might be a brilliant idea. Maybe you're looking at opening a hypermarket, a big supermarket of sorts. But then imagine all of your employees, 500 plus employees, for example, all of them traveling from the city to your location. Not only do you have to pay them salaries, salaries. It's also difficult to retain them because the farther that you're located, there is going to be a lot of attrition. And then you would also have to pay for their commute, etc., etc. So there are a lot of costs involved associated with every location. And one would want to evaluate those operational expenses before uh, selecting a store. Okay. What are the other factors? While broadly these are the four governing factors, but then there are several other factors that affect the site selection, beginning with rooftop before retail. Now, what does this phrase mean? What does this interesting phrase, rooftop before sale retail, means? Now, when I say rooftop before retail, this is an outlook that a retailer usually adopts, where he or she is saying that, hey, you know what, while a very fancy location is great, but does this location assure me of continuous sales? Does it assure me of continuous revenue, and that eventually resulting in profitability? Right? It's important that every business understands the revenue potential that a location offers. How do we calculate that? We have some numericals to help you understand that. We'll see that as we go along. But what's very essential before you choose any location is understanding the revenue potential the retail location has, ultimately the profitability itself, which is what should be at the center, the heart of this decision making, if you ask me. And then the net revenue, of course, we've seen near customers more important than the distance one. So is the location catering to the most primary audience within your trade area? That's the question that you must answer. And then value platform, and then the consumer connect, right? So being situated in that location, is it really clearly conveying the value of your brand and the products that you have there? And then are you able to effortlessly connect with your primary audience, right? So that's a very important question. Trading area considerations. Trading area means the radius from within which your primary and secondary audience come from, right? The psychographic factors, of course, the threshold population that a store can cater to. Now, every location and every store has a maximum limit, maximum physical limit in terms of how many people can be there within the restaurant or within the store at one time. But then, if you're anticipating that there are going to be more people in your store than you've anticipated, then that can really cause a lot of challenges. For example, in India, you have a brand called as DMart, right? DMart competes with a lot of supermarkets in India, and DMart is popular because of their very, very discounted prices. And every time, at least over the weekends, I have seen that I've never been inside one, but then outside at least there is a huge queue, and then a lot of people waiting for the checkout and things like that, you know. So DMart, obviously, it would be in their interest to look at bigger spaces, because anything congested can really discourage some of the customers from going inside. I at least am never motivated to enter one, right? And of course, demographic changes over a period of time is another aspect that one has to look at. There are a lot of countries, for example, uh, Germany or Taiwan or South Korea or Japan. All of these countries are really looking at a demographic shift over the years, where the birth rates have greatly reduced. There are fewer younger people. You know, of course, there are a lot of immigrants, but then I'm talking about general shift within the population. You see that there are a lot of there is a huge chunk of aging population and fewer younger people, right? Japan and South Korea, at least, are two countries that are really facing the heat of this because of lower birth rate, right? And then also, it's for brands to look at a more broader picture and say, about 50 years from now, is this brand going to have a future in a country with declining birth rate, right? Whatever those brands could be. Therefore, you will find a lot of brands that cater to, you know, a slightly older population are finding it more lucrative to operate in those markets as opposed to some of the others. Luxury is one of the uh, segments within retail that's doing very, very well. Luxury travel, luxury hotel, all of these kind of services. And then the perception about the brands, does it resonate with your audience? And does the retail in any way help you, retail sites in any way help you, reinforce that perception among the consumers is another aspect that you would have to look at, right? Minimum administrative and supply costs, of course, that always shall remain at the epicenter of all the operational decisions that the retailer would have to make, etc. And then also the interdependence with the corporate finance and the expansion models generally that the brand has been having. Now, for example, if I were to revisit the example of IKEA, which is a Swedish brand which expanded, within Europe first and all over the world later. Now, if you look at their expansion model and generally the site selection model, they've always been located outside of the city limits, in the suburbs, in the outskirts, etc. But when they entered the Indian market, they adopted the same model and they thought that it would work very well. In some cities of India, it worked very, very well. For example, Hyderabad and Bangalore are doing exceedingly well, which is what I understand. But when they adopted the same thing in Mumbai, it didn't work for them as much as it did for Bangalore or Hyderabad. Reason being, in Mumbai, the dependency on public transportation is very, very heavy, right? So if somebody has to go to IKEA, which is very far from the city, everybody is going to think, oh, is there a metro or a local train that takes me there? If it's not, then, really, I'm not interested in going to a place like that, right? So IKEA then definitely had to re-look at their own decision and then open smaller units or smaller versions of the store within the city limits to cater to this kind of an audience. So while your corporate model might look like, uh, you know, look, it might be in a certain manner. However, each of these countries that they are expanding in might have their own dynamics, and then which will force these brands to make those very region-specific adjustments in their strategy. Okay. These are some of the other factors that affect site selection. Pretty much everything around what we've discussed just now, please go through in your own time. Not only are those factors important, but even traffic flow and accessibility relevant factors again have a huge impact on the site selection itself. Now, vehicular traffic. Now, do I want more vehicular traffic? Do I want less vehicular traffic? Again, it's something that depends on the brand that I am, choosing the store for, right? If I am a very high-end brand, then I certainly would not want to be located in a place which has a lot of pedestrian traffic, really. It really doesn't go with the ambience that I'm, good, very quiet and a beautiful ambience that I'm looking to create, perhaps. Ease of vehicular access. Again, like I said, depends entirely on what kind of a store you're talking about. If it's a supermarket, if it's like a departmental store, like lifestyle or your shopper stop and things like those, then of course it would be easier to be located in a place that's convenient for vehicular traffic to access the store. Access to major highways, your IKEA all over the world has adopted this strategy. Metro Cash and Carry, which is a German brand, started operating in Bangalore first, and now Metro Cash and Carry has been acquired by Reliance. Now, Metro Cash and Carry is a B2B FMCG supermarket, a hypermarket of sorts, right? Again, Metro Cash and Carry has been very clear about their locational strategy, always outside of the city because of their huge setup. Within the city is not possible. Within cities like Bangalore have grown so fast that although they chose a a suburban out of the city location, all of those have quickly come within the folds of the city these days. Street congestion might be good, may not be good. Again, depends on the kind of brand that you're looking at. Pedestrian traffic, if you are a store that relies heavily on walk-in traffic, pedestrian traffic, then of course, for example, your 7-Eleven, everywhere in the world, you will typically find that they are located very close to a metro station or a bus stop or heavily touristy areas because they are a convenience store, isn't it? So everything that they sell is mostly for people that are coming into your store to quickly grab a bottle of water, maybe a bottle of juice or gum, or maybe a quick sandwich or something like that, right? So again, it depends on where would you want to be located, depending on the store. And then zoning refers to restrictions that are there uh, in every place, right? If I could give you an example, uh, I'll give you two examples. In India, there is a rule that stores selling alcoholic beverages cannot be located within 500 meters of a temple or religious place, not necessarily just temple, any religious place or a school. That means if a religious place of worship or a school is there within the 500 meters radius, you are not going to get a license to open a liquor store. That's zoning restriction imposed by the local authorities that either enables or restricts a certain kinds of stores from being operational. And then, there is a mall in Pune, and then about 7 or 8 years ago, there was a huge fire on the top floor of that mall. Why? Because a certain restaurant, the kitchen of that restaurant, there was a cylinder burst, LPG cylinder burst. And then as a result of that, the entire kitchen blew up. And then very quickly there was fire everywhere on that floor, the roof, etc. The fire spread very, very quickly. So the mall, after, of course, they were shut for several months before they reopened. And when they reopened after refurbishing, they made a very strict rule that restaurants are, of course, welcome, but then they are not allowed to have LPG cooking units. It had to be electrical cooking units only, which really restricted a lot of restaurants from opening their outlets over there, right? So again, zoning can either enable or discourage you from choosing a certain location. And signages related restrictions, there are some locations where you cannot have any big billboards or signages that announce your store. Even in Pune, there are a lot of these residential areas where earlier, of course, you couldn't open a commercial setup, but these days one is allowed to open a commercial setup or a shop or something like that, but then they are not really allowed to have these huge billboards and things like that. Why? Because they feel it's not great for the aesthetics of that particular place. Okay. And of course, these are not very hard restrictions. Over a period of time, those restrictions could be lifted even based on public demand and things like those. Restriction on tenant mix. For example, your luxury retail malls, it is in their interest, because they want to be seen as a luxury retail mall, they would not want to have any other high street fashion shops opening on those floors or particularly in that mall itself. The rent itself is so high that it discourages others, even if the rent is something that they are willing to pay. Because they want to control the tenant mix, they would probably discourage these kind of stores from coming up in places like those. Safety code restrictions. Of course, we've seen that. Okay, and then there are some of the characteristics, please go through in your own time, very self-explanatory. Traffic flow and accessibility, very, very crucial. Now, when we talk about traffic flow and accessibility, it's not just for consumers, customers who are coming to your store, but also for the vehicles that come to restock or replenish your own stock into your warehouses. So not only must your store have access to customers, but then you must also have access for those heavy vehicles that come to replenish your stock. Therefore, in Japan, because there is restriction, not only is there very limited real estate space in Japan because of the topography of that country generally, and also space is scarce, at least in countries like Osaka, Kyoto, Tokyo especially. You will find that a lot of stores are very small, and then they don't have a lot of warehouses, and there's absolutely definitely no access from behind for these large vehicles to come and then restock and things like that. So therefore, in countries like those, the reliance on very regular restocking, and then the reliance on the wholesalers that provide those restocking services probably every day or once in 2 days. Therefore, you will find that the retail industry, the locus of power in Japan's retail value chain, the locus of power really uh, is a lot with the wholesalers because of their geographic conditions. This is something that we will study as we go along. But then what I really want to demonstrate here or drive this point home, that how a retail industry is organized in a country really depends on a lot of aspects, and accessibility is one of the primary aspects. And parking considerations, of course, not only do we have to look at, how much parking space should we reserve for our customers, if it's possible, and then also look at, not only just customers, but then employees' parking availability as well. So in order to really calculate all of that, retailers typically look at how long typically does a shopping experience last in a store. That do they take 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? Then based on that, they are really able to calculate the vehicular movement within the parking spaces, and then they will then be able to calculate how many parking spots should they buy or make provision for. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Any questions up to this point? Okay. If there are no questions, let's quickly look at why is it important for the retailers to know who the adjacent tenants are, or who are your neighbors? Who are your neighbors? Now, if we look at the pictures here that you have on your screen, a Burger King store is located right next to a McDonald's, and everywhere in the world, these two brands compete with one another, global brands. Of course, there are some local brands that they compete with, but globally, these two brands compete with one another head on. If you look at Wendy's and Taco Bell's again, located next to one another. And you might wonder, why do retailers don't really mind opening stores right next to their competitors, knowing fully well that the pedestrian traffic or any traffic that's there, that's coming into that area, might get distributed between their brands, right? Knowing fully well, being fully aware that there always is a possibility that somebody who might want to go to McDonald's might change their mind and go to Burger King just because they saw it next to McDonald's, right? So now this is a predicament that every retailer faces, and you will see that globally, although this predicament prevails, they do not have reservations locations opening store next to their competitors. And this really could be understood using something that's called as a socially optimal solution in retail. Now, why is this? Right? It is because some of these locations have historically been proven to be excellent for that particular kind of shopping. For example, here in Pune, not very far from where I live, there are at least about 10 stores that sell jewelry. Okay. Now, were there jewelry stores before, no, the trend started only about 7, 8 years ago. The only store that was there was Tanishq at the time. And then after which we saw several stores opening. And today there are more than about 10 stores that sell jewelry. Why? Because, and it has become a very popular place for wedding shoppers and then festival shoppers, etc., particularly the wedding shoppers, right? And why is it that there are more retailers in jewelry still willing to open stores? Do they not feel that the market has saturated? Not quite. They feel that now this place has become known for jewelry shopping. There could be a cascading effect. Let's say I went into Tanishq and didn't quite find anything that I wanted, then it's natural that I will probably go to a Kalyan, which is right next to Tanishq, and then maybe go to an Aura, which is right next to Kalyan. Right? So that way, there always is a possibility of this spillover effect, right? And then that's how every retailer is able to guarantee himself or herself of the minimum required numbers, number of audience, and a number of or the amount of revenue they'll be able to earn, although they're being located in a heavily competitive area. Right? And then there's a very nice video whose link has been given to you in the presentation. I would urge everyone to watch this video to understand this concept of socially optimal solution in retail. And it's called as Nash's equilibrium. And then, that is what really explains the socially optimal solution. And of course, you have shopping malls. What would be these strategies that the retailers adopt when they are considering a shopping mall as a potential retail location? Of course, uh, one could be assured of footfalls, and then one could also be assured of impulse buying when they are located in a shop. And then also there are always possibilities of comparison shopping. What do I mean by comparison shopping? Let's say I want to buy myself clothes today. I might walk into an H&M, or probably I might want to also go into a Zara, right? So if I don't like anything in H&M, I could just as easily walk into a Zara store, which is right next to it. So there, being located in a mall gives a provision, or rather gives this choice to people to walk into different stores, compare the prices, compare the quality, compare the style, and then be able to buy, right? And then uh, there are always some anchor stores, in every mall. When I say anchor stores, some very popular stores that pull audience. I'm sure when you walk into a mall, you will be able to see such stores. It could be a Zara, it could be anything, right? It could be any one popular store that's not there everywhere but that mall. So usually, if there is a choice, usually retailers would prefer to be situated around those anchored stores, because that the footfall is assured. So your brand, your store also gets a lot of visibility being situated next to those anchor stores, right? Okay. Now, let's quickly talk about the concept of trade area, and after which we will go into learning about two theories that have been, for several years looked at, theories that support retailers in making making the site decision. But let's look at what is the meaning of a trade area. Trade area is the radius of that particular retail store from where your audience really come from. So you have something known as a primary trading area, which means this could be 500 meters or even a kilometer for that matter, and this is where your largest percentage of shoppers come from. If it's a supermarket, then then from within 500 meters, all the households that are there in that radius are your primary audience or primary trading area. If it's a restaurant, then all offices located within 1 kilometer or even 500 meters or walking distance or whatever it might be, from within that radius is your primary audience, right? And then, of course, there are secondary trade areas. It could be, say, 3 or 4 kilometers around your store location. And then, of course, there is the fringe trading area, which is not very important. Not a lot of your consumers come from there unless they have some kind of a loyalty, right? There are some restaurants which are very far, maybe from where you are, but because you love the experience in that restaurant, you probably love the food over there, you don't mind driving 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers to go to that restaurant, isn't it? So while not a lot of them might come, you will definitely see some movement from the fringe trading areas also to your store location. There are different kinds of trade areas, important also from your examination perspective. The first is deterministic trade area. Now, this is created based on customer addresses, that the retail store has been able to accumulate over the years. Of course, when you go there, you have to create a profile, isn't it? They ask you for your phone number, they ask you where is your house, if you're comfortable, giving the address or whatever. So based on the profile that the retail brands have been able to develop over the years, the general database that they've been able to develop over the years, they understand which areas do they typically come from. And then that becomes the trade area for them. And then they try to really focus all of their advertising and all the other promotional work that they do to those specific areas. Now that you've understood, you've determined what your trade area is. And then the second kind is called as the proximal trade area. This is the trade area which is closest to the store, say 500 meters or 1 kilometer from the store, right? So that would be the proximal trade area, right? Now, why is it necessary to determine the proximal trade area? Especially in the case of franchising, this becomes very important. For example, McDonald's, right? McDonald's operates on a franchising model. Anybody is free to take their franchising license and then open a McDonald's. But then what happens if there are McDonald's, let's say, not in just about 100 meters from one another? It's, of course, cannibalizing into each other's businesses. And then the franchisees won't be very happy that McDonald's is giving away licenses to open stores and really allowing them to compete with their own brand. So in these cases, these places become demarcated. They say that 2 kilometers is the proximal trade area, and then there will not be another McDonald's within 2 kilometers from store A of McDonald's, right? So therefore, it becomes necessary to determine the proximal trade area, especially for cases like these. And then there is the probabilistic trade area, which is determined based on a number of factors, not just one or two factors, not just geographic factors, but then several other factors such as the product mix, attractiveness of the brand itself, the alternatives that are present in that space, the competitors, generally the nature of the city, the traffic volumes, etc., etc. right? So it's 12:16 now. Let's take a, a 7 minute break and then come back after that. So let's regroup at 12:23 sharp. Are there any questions in the meantime? Are there any questions? Okay, so let's group in about 7 minutes sharp. Exactly. Okay, welcome back. Let's quickly continue the session. We are learning about the concept of trade area, continuing the discussion. There are two models that really support this decision. Now, what really we must understand at this point are these models are enablers. Rather, they help you, they support your decision and not entirely or rather, in other words, these models could be referred to as one of the uh, uh, you know answers, one of the factors that help you decide the location. But then retailers must, of course, take into account several other aspects also before taking the decision, and not entirely base the decision on models like these, right? And that said, of course, there are also automated solutions to do these calculations yourself. However, we are really going to be looking at the theory behind those models so that you understand, should you at some point have to select, should you at some point have to make a decision of your own, then probably these models could be also referred to alongside other factors, right? The first model that we are going to be learning about is called as the Huff's gravity model. Now, Huff's gravity model really is based on a premise that's called as distance decay. Now, what is the meaning of distance decay? Distance decay means that as the distance between two locations increases, there is lesser and lesser activity between them. So there is an inverse association between the distance and the involvement. As the distance increases, there is lesser activity between the two places, right? Obviously, think about it from your own experience. Maybe your next door neighbor who also became your very best friend, and then you would see each other every day, maybe have a cup of coffee every other day, and then that friend, let's say, moved to a different location about 10 kilometers. So would you really be able to see her or meet her, um, even alternate days for that matter? Possibly no, obviously, because as the in distance has increased, your own involvement with your own engagement with that friend of yours has decreased considerably. And borrowing the same concept even in retail, we are saying that farther the store, lesser is the likelihood of anyone or of people dropping into your store or patronizing your store. That's the concept of distance decay, right? And then let's look at the Huff's gravity model. Now, this particular model says this is actually based on the proximal trade area that you learned about earlier. And then Huff's gravity model is a mathematical model that basically calculates the correlation between the distance and then the trading area. Okay, now let's quickly look at what are the information that you would need to be able to employ this mathematical model to calculate the retail location, right? You would, of course, need the size of the store itself, and then you would need the distance between the size and then your trading area. It could be both primary, secondary, or for that matter, even the fringe trading area. Now, what does the Huff's gravity model calculate? It essentially calculates the probability percentage of the people residing in those trading areas of coming to your store, the probability percentage of people visiting your store. If the probability percentage, let's say, is 50, it's still excellent. In a trade area that probably has about 100 people and, sorry, 100 residents, 100 homes, and if your probability percentage that you've arrived at is 50, that means of the 100 households, you can estimate at least 50 households coming to your store to buy whatever that they need to buy, which is still an excellent number, right? Okay. Now, these are the two most important information that you would require. And then what you would also require is the importance, or rather the numerical equivalent of the importance of the product that you are selling. Now, when I say importance, if it's, say, FMCG, if it's, let's say, groceries, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables, or for that matter, anything that you sell in the grocery store, if it's a medical store, all of these are very critical for survival itself. So obviously, the numerical equivalent of the importance would be 1 because it's very, very critical. Right. So that is something that we signify in the form of a lambda value in the formula. Let's quickly look at the formula itself. Now, what we are calculating here is PIJ, which stands for probability of consumers traveling from their point of origin, which is, of course, in some location in the trading area, to your store, right? So that's the probability percentage that I'm looking at calculating. Okay. Now, how does that serve the purpose? If you know that, say, 70% of the people within that trading area are likely to travel to your store, then that location has to be excellent for you. But if you are calculating, say, a 20% in your primary trading area, then obviously the footfalls are going to be only to the extent of 20% of the larger population that you're catering to. So there is probably a need for you to look at an alternate uh, location, right? So you would definitely want to choose a location that has the highest probability percentage of consumers traveling from their point of origin to the store. That's what we are trying to calculate here, PIJ. And then SJ is the square foot of the store itself, right? It could be 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, but you still need to have the square foot area uh, of the store itself, right? And TIJ stands for the travel time between the trading area and your store. Now, we have to be very careful when we look at the travel time, because while the distance may indicate a certain time, but because of vehicular movement, traffic congestion, and other aspects, the travel time might vary from one city to another, one area to another. For example, cities that have the heaviest traffic, for example, your Bangalore, Pune, also Tokyo, Atlanta. These are some of the cities that are very infamous for their very heavy traffic, and the travel time varies considerably. Even if it's 2 kilometers in a city like Bangalore, it can take you anywhere between, say, just a couple of minutes to even 25, 30 minutes, depending on what area we're talking about. So it's very relative and subjective even. So we have to be very careful when we determine the travel time here. Okay. And lambda is an exponent that reflects the uh, relative importance of the product in question. Like we discussed, if it's a very important product, such as food or medicines, then the lambda value is usually 1. And then let's say if it's some luxury handbag store, then these are not that essential for your survival itself. So lambda value could be 3, 4, or even. So we'll look at how that impacts. And then N stands for number of shopping locations available. Okay, so let's quickly understand what this means using an example. I have two examples. We will try and discuss both. Right? Or maybe discuss one, and then the second one is something that you can refer to on your own. Of course, the presentation has the solution for the second example as well, and you should be just as easily be able to understand looking at that example on your own. So in this case, let's go to the this example of a supermarket called as More, and they are considering opening their shop in a mall in Bangalore called as Forum Mall, one of the very first malls that opened in Bangalore, Kormangala. And the very first McDonald's of the city also happened to open in Forum Mall. And when I was a college student, I remember there was a huge queue and it came in the papers. It was everywhere that people stood in front of that McDonald's store for like 4 hours before they could get their hands on that burger. Yeah. Anyway, that's the context of this Forum Mall, a very popular mall in the city of Bangalore. So this more store that's in that particular mall is looking at adding a new category of products, and in this case it's Gillette men's grooming products, shaving products, etc., men's grooming products. So this particular mall, this is what the trade area, the catchment analysis of the Forum Mall looks like in Bangalore. Primary trading area is from, in this case, they have indicated the trading area not in terms of the distance, but then the time taken to cover that distance. So the radius is 5 minutes driving distance from Forum Mall. That's the primary trading area. Secondary trading area is 10 minutes driving distance. And then the fringe trading area is, of course, 15 minutes driving distance. And when we substitute this information in the formula, this is what we get. They've also given us information that's necessary for us to be able to do the Huff's, use the Huff's gravity model. The floor area that's available, or rather the floor area that this supermarket has is about 3,460 square foot. And then what you are expected to do is calculate the probability percentage for all the three trading areas, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, as well as 15 minutes. So this way, you will get a fair idea in terms of which trading area would give you the maximum customers. And the lambda value in this case has been considered as 1 because one would want to imagine that the men's grooming products such as shaving and other products would be used by them every single day, very essential. Therefore, lambda value here is 1. So let's quickly substitute all of these information that we've got into the formula. And this is what the numbers look like once you have calculated that bit, right? We do have the square footage, 3460 divided by 5, which is the travel time between your store and the primary trading area, point of origin, to the power of 1, which is the lambda value that we have, 1, right? Divide that by 3460 divided by 5 to the power of 1 plus, of course, in the denominator, you have all the three trading areas, 10 to the power of 1 and 15 to the power of 1. So when you calculate, I would urge everyone to do this calculation on your own. You know, Typically this is something that we would do using a piece of chalk on a board, but then because this is a virtual class, I would really want you to pick up a piece of paper and a pencil and do this calculation on your own. So when solve this equation, you would get a probability percentage of 54% by 54%, almost 55%, right? So that would mean that of the number of households that are present within the 5 minutes driving distance of the store, you can almost be assured of 50% of those people visiting your store to buy men's grooming products, the new category that you've introduced in your supermarket. What happens when it's P10? When in the secondary trading area, the probability percentage reduces to 27.27. Why does it reduce? Probably because there are other stores, maybe smaller convenience stores that are located in the secondary area where people would not really want to drive 10 minutes just to be able to pick up a shaving cream or a shaving blade or whatever it is, right? So it reduces to 27%. It further reduces to 18% when the driving distance is 15 minutes. You would say that isn't it very obvious? Yes, of course, it might seem obvious, but now you have data to further reaffirm that, idea that you might have. But what's really interesting here is that the lambda value plays a very significant role. The importance that one associates with the product is very important. Let's quickly look at the same example and look at a product where the lambda value is 2. Okay, so in this case, it's the same mall, same store, and now the store is looking at adding another category of products, and this is wheat products. So the women who are in the classroom might know that this is one of the very popular women's grooming brands, right? So in this case, not a product that's really used every day. So therefore, the lambda value is in this case going to be considered as 2. So it's useful, but not something that's essential for everyday life. So therefore, I have, considered it as 2 over here. So in this case, let's see how the probability percentage changes dramatically. You will see that the probability percentage of people living within 5 minutes driving distance has greatly gone up, and 73% is what you see. P10, it's 18%, and P15, again, it's 8%. What does it mean? What are we really observing here? Is that the probability percentage has increased when the lambda value changed. It's because, again, it's a very product oriented or product dependent answer. One would imagine that products like these are usually, which are not non-essential really, are usually picked during the monthly grocery shopping that happens in supermarkets. Therefore, the probability percentage again has sees some impact over there. And then there is another very interesting problem here, which really helps you understand the comparison here. So in this case, a store that sells shoes is looking at opening a store near a university where, of course, there'll be thousands of students, right? So they are looking at 3 different locations around the university, and then each of these stores have a different square foot area, and then of course are located at different distances from the university itself. So if you are a retailer, you have 3 options, and then you have to use Hub's gravity model to understand which of these locations is better. And look at the number of students here, 12,000. So that means it's a very attractive location. But then given these choices, the retailer will have to make a decision. So the lambda value has been assumed at 2. Why? Because you would not buy shoes every day. While they're very essential, but then these are not things that you buy very often. You probably buy one every second month or every third month, I would imagine. Right? So the answer again is given to you over here, the probability percentage for all 3 locations, and then how you could also calculate the sales, the number of customers per year, and you will be also, based on that number, be able to also project the revenues and average sales for that particular year. So not only is this model helping you calculate the ideal most location, calculate the probability of number of people that can come to your store, also support you in making those revenue projections for the future, right? So therefore, a very handy formula to have in the pocket. Okay, and then the next one is something that's called as Riley's law of retail gravitation. Now, retail gravitation theory suggests that there are some of the factors that are in they are really consistent across different countries. These shopping behaviors that consumers demonstrate could be the same whether you're talking about US or whichever other country that you're talking about, our own, for example. And these behaviors essentially determine the shopping patterns, right? And then that's and these behaviors really help you predict the number of people that might actually patronize your store. That's what the retail gravity theory essentially conveys. That's the premise on which this theory is based, right? And what is it that you're actually trying to calculate here? You're actually trying to calculate the point of indifference. And what does the point of indifference means? This point of indifference is actually the point of extremity, meaning the farthest point or a limit to the farthest distance beyond which the consumer is really not motivated to travel to your store. Let's say a particular restaurant about 30 kilometers from here. How many people are motivated to travel? And then you might say, hey, you know what, 30 minutes is nothing. Uh, I absolutely, 30 kilometers is a good distance for me to drive. And then I absolutely enjoy that restaurant. I don't mind going there. And then let's say that location closes and then they move that restaurant another 20 kilometers away, and then now it is 50 kilometers away from you. And then are you really equally motivated to drive another 20 kilometers and go there? You would probably say 30 is how much I can drive. Now that it's 50 kilometers, it's not possible, or it's really not an attractive opportunity for me to travel all the way 50 kilometers just to have a meal. So you have now become indifferent to the idea of traveling to that place just to have a meal, right? So that's what we're trying to calculate here, that what is that magic number, and and what is that radius within which I can expect people as a retailer to drive to my store. Any location beyond that is really not my trading area. That's what I'm trying to calculate here. What's the formula and what would you require? You would, of course, need the distance between two locations, right? And then what you would also require is the population in each of these locations. Now, this would also come very handy if you're looking at, let's say, choosing between two trading areas, or rather two locations, right? There is a certain area that has 10 lakh population, then there is another area B, which probably has 20 lakh population. Now, you would definitely be attracted to choose a midpoint, isn't it? You would say that, hey, you know what, I want 30 lakh to be my trading area, combination of both. Now, that's a good in theory. However, which location within those two areas would be a good location for you is what you're really looking at calculating. Okay. Let's quickly do the example, and what we are talking about now would all make sense when we look at the problem, right? There are two cities in this case, and the retailer has to evaluate which point, or rather proximity to which city would be the best decision for this retailer to open a store. Now, both of these cities are 65 kilometers apart from one another. City A has a population of 250,000 people. City B is a smaller city which just has about a lakh people. So what I'm really trying to calculate here is the point of indifference for city A. I am more inclined to open my shop close to city A. Now what I will need to calculate is the trading area for city A also. That's also something that I will understand. Now, when I put the formula, when I put substitute the numbers that have been given to me in the question in the formula, this is what I am able to calculate. Uh, 75, which is the distance between both the locations, divided by 1 plus square root of 1 lakh divided by 2,50,000, which is the population. When I when I resolve this equation, I get the point of extremity as 45.9. That means the point of indifference for me is 45.9 from city A. City A, which has a population of 250,000 people, I can expect that these people would most probably be willing to drive to my store so long as it is within that radius of 45 or 46 kilometers. Anything beyond that, I cannot expect them to drive to my store, right? Now, you would then want to ask me that city B has a lesser driving distance. Would it not make more sense to be situated there? But you would also have to look at the population. It's a smaller city, therefore, the possibilities of earning higher revenues is also definitely limited. So you could look at a location. Either the farthest point, of course, for you is 46 kilometers, but anything within that would be a good possibility. Okay, so that's what we're really trying to calculate, the point of extremity or the point of indifference, right? And please understand that each of these mathematical models that we have discussed, one cannot use these in isolation and say that based only on this solution, I'm going to choose the retail location. There are several other factors that are at play, and the retailers could look at these mathematical models to sort of reaffirm their own assumptions about choice of a good location. But then again, it's very, very important to also validate those assumptions through some of these numerical justifications that we have, right? So there is yet another problem for you, a practice problem. Please do it yourself in your own time. Okay, so we have about 10, 15 more minutes before we wind up. Let's quickly look at franchising. I am sure this is something that you might have learned earlier. Therefore, I'm just going to be very, very quick. I'm sure you understand what the franchising model look like. There is a franchisor who is the licensor, and then there is the franchisee who receives the license from the franchisor to use the brand name, the product, or whatever it is, right? The trademark, all of that, right? And what is it that the franchisee pays the franchisor? It's a royalty. The royalty could be 5%, 10%, 7%, 20% of the total sales. So the franchisor in this case receiving a royalty on the total sales, right? Not the profits, but then no matter what the profits are, they get 20%. Okay. Do we have any businesses in India that operate on the franchising model? In India, McDonald's, your KFC, Pizza Hut, Baskin Robbins, all of these, a lot of these operate in the franchising model. Even is it only to do with restaurants and F&B? Hardly so. You have travel companies, even Cox and Kings, your Thomas Cook also operate on franchising model. Okay. Now, what are the different models of engagement here? You have manufacturer to retailer franchising arrangement. In the case of automobiles, for example, your Maruti Suzuki, or for that matter, your Jeep, all of them have franchising arrangements. For example, in Pune, Jeep has a franchising arrangement with a company called Sky Moto, right? they have an exclusivity agreement. That means that Jeep will not give franchising licenses to anyone other than Sky Motor. Okay, so these could be exclusive franchising arrangements or non-exclusive even, but definitely between the manufacturer and then the retailer, in this case, the auto retailer or auto dealer. Then there could be manufacturer to wholesaler arrangements. For example, Coke everywhere in the world has given bottling franchises or bottling licenses to some of these plants. Okay. Um, and what these people usually do is send the concentrated drink, and then once it comes to the bottling plants, they add whatever or whatever else that they have to add, and then bottle it and then distribute it to retailers. So in this case, the franchising is between the manufacturer and the wholesaler. There could be a wholesaler to retailer franchising, which is the case, for example, in hardware products, and then there could be a retailer to retailer franchising even. If I could give you an example, your Cox and Kings or even Thomas Cook has company operated retail outlets also, and then also operates through franchises within the same city. Lakme is another example. Lakme also has company operated stores, and then those, the same brand might also have franchises, right? Different types of franchising businesses. There could be product franchising, there could be manufacturer franchising, there could be business format franchising. Cox and Kings is an example. And then there could be investment franchising. For example, there are hotel companies where the building could belong to someone else, but then the entire hotel is managed by somebody else. And then that management of the property is what is really licensed to the hotel company, right? So this is a very popular arrangement, particularly in hotel business. Now, the roles of the franchisor and the franchisee, how involved are they in terms of store site selection? Not quite, while it's up to the franchisee to select and own the location, the franchisor may have some say in it, but otherwise, largely, it's up to the franchisee to select a location. Franchisor might give some broad guidelines how to choose a site location, but doesn't really get involved in the decision making per se. The design, of course, the layout, the visual merchandising aspect of it, the colors, everything is given by the franchisor. The franchisee will only have to bear the cost of making sure that the brand guidelines are implemented properly in the design and decor of the store, right? And the employees are all hired by the franchisee. They're supervised and paid also by the franchisee. But what the franchisor could do is give them training from time to time, because if it's a Lakme salon, then naturally you would not know whether it's through a franchisor or a company owned outlet. For you, every employee in that Lakme salon is representing Lakme brand for you. So therefore, especially when it comes to service oriented businesses, it becomes very essential to have some kind of a uniformity because of these aspects. So therefore, training is given to them by the franchisors. Products typically owned by the franchisor. It could be the trademark, the logo, the secret recipe, the design, brand, everything is owned by the franchisor. Franchisees, of course, get the license to use the trademark and logo, etc. Brand building, in this case, the franchisee has to adhere to the promotional aspects or any brand guidelines that the franchisor has, right? Advertising and promotion. For the franchisor, it's more at a broader international or national level, but then the local promotions usually have to be something that are adjusted to the local environment. And franchisees usually consult the franchisors before floating any advertising of their own, right? One McDonald's cannot just start offering 50% discount while nobody else is. So therefore, advertising and promotion are also largely floated or percolated down by the national campaigns that they are running. Okay, so what are some of the legal considerations, right? Of course, this is governed under the Indian Contracts Act. But then, when you are drawing up papers to enter into a franchising agreement, these are typically the things that one must have. Or usually, if you uh, become privy to a document like this, you will see that this is what is usually covered. The duration of the agreement, of course, the obligations of the franchisor and the franchisee have to be negotiated beforehand. The territory, it's for the franchisee to make sure that you are getting territorial exclusivity for your brand. Otherwise, you do not want the franchisor giving out licenses and left, right, and center in the city, and then that reducing the, uh, you know, volume of business that you can expect from that trading area. So usually the franchisees want to negotiate a higher territorial exclusivity. And then, of course, the royalty payable, again, something that's negotiable. However, if they are standardized for brands like McDonald's and bigger brands, then there is very little room for negotiation if it's a standard, right? Then, the usage of trademark, brand, patents, and all of those, of course, are clearly highlighted. Any infringements, what are the consequences of that? What is it that they will do in case there's a dispute, etc., etc. And then support, as in terms of advertising and promotions. Is there anything that the franchisor will be giving to support in terms of money and other support? All of those are, of course, predetermined. Terms of renewal, as well as termination, cancellation policies, etc. So you will find that these are some of the usual features of that particular agreement. And then what are the advantages and disadvantages? Please read them in your own time. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Are there any questions up to this point? Okay, so if there are no further questions, let's quickly move to the next strategy that retailers have to pay close attention to, and that is the store design and layout itself. Now that you have decided the store location, now comes the second crucial question. How do I design the layout of this particular store? There is no standard answer. It depends entirely on the space that you have available and the kind of store that you're looking to set up. And the layout is very, very crucial because it is something that's silently communicating with your audience and helping them navigate through the different products that you have in the store. Now, does it only include the interior? No, hardly so. It also involves the exterior of the store and then conveys a lot of messages about the brand itself and what are the different values that the brand resonates with. Okay, the storefront and layout really very silently and in a very significant manner communicate to the audience about the brand itself. So therefore, it's very important that a lot of attention is paid to the store design and layout. So here is an activity that I would want all of you to do, whether you are attending this class right here, right now, or attending or watching this video, at a later time. What I want you to really do is take a look at both of these pictures and tell me what is the contrast that you are able to observe, right? You will probably see things like the picture on your left hand side is a lot less cluttered, and there is a lot of place for people to move around. And then you will also see that every product really has its own place within the store. There is a lot of um, focus that's going on each of these products where people can actually, even if they are viewing something from a distance, there's no way they'll miss anything because everything is laid out neatly and nothing is overlapping, nothing is behind the other, everything is visible. As opposed to the picture on your right hand side where, there is a lot of clutter. Things have been kept very close to one another. It's possible that you're only looking at things that are in the front and missing out things that are at the back. They've used mannequins. There are styling suggestions, right? You will see a lot of things that are kept together. Um, so therefore you will see there's a stark contrast between how things have been displayed within the store. And if you look at some of the colors that have been used, if left hand side, you will find that the colors that they have used are very subtle and subdued and then appear to be conveying messages such as luxury, very subtle luxury, as opposed to a picture on your right hand side where they have, of course, tried to use some colors, but then there is no theme or anything like that. It's very functional, and then doesn't really appear to be a luxury store to me, right? And then if you look at uh, the place around the store, it's a larger store on the left hand side, and then they've utilized the space very optimally, leaving a lot of space for people to walk around, browse, and then very leisurely examine every product. As opposed to the store on the right hand side, you will see that there's little space and a very functional kind of a layout, not anything that's conveying luxury, but then more for quick functional shopping. Let's quickly look at what brands these are. The left-hand side, I have picture of a brand that's of Versace. Once again, a very high-end luxury retail brand in fashion apparel. And then the second picture is a Forever 21. I'm sure it's a brand that you might have come across. High street fashion and not even premium, actually. It's very high street. Okay. Anyway, so let's move forward and look at some of the components that the retailers would have to pay attention to when it comes to store exterior as well as interior. When we talk about the store exterior, the place of the location, of course, we've learned how to choose an ideal location. What one would also have to take into account are the marquees. Now, what do I mean by marquees? Marquees are those uh, you know shades that have been put in front of the store where if people are getting off from their cars, they're not instantly exposed to the sun or anything. The porches, the driveways, anything that sort of has the front entrance of your store covered, sheltered, that's a marquee. The store entrance itself, what's the kind of facades that you have? Do you have a huge entrance? Do you have a glass wall that allows people to see what's inside of the store? Do you have very attractive window display behind those glass walls? What kind of a door type do you have? Do you have a dalban that's opening the door for you, very luxury, something that's associated with luxury and then hospitality? Or do you have those automated doors that open, sensing your movement? Or do you have to open the door yourself? Doesn't quite say luxury when you have to open the door yourself, isn't it? And then what are the walkways like? And then what's the size of the store? What are the color, the material, the textures, the lighting that you have used? And then any theft prevention sensor devices that you have outside of the store. So all of these things are aspects that you cover under the exterior of the store. When it comes to interior, of course, we are going to be studying the interior in great detail as we go along in the next session. But the store interior comprises of not just the visual merchandising aspect, but the corridor, the other envelopes, that are formed based on how you have placed your merchandise, the interior layout, the methods of display, signages, visual merchandising, of course, and other amenities. So these are aspects that we are going to be studying about one by one and in great detail. So that's where your journey of learning about retail management becomes that much more exciting. We are going to be looking at all of these technical aspects of designing a retail experience in detail so that you are able to understand the nuances, the complexities, and then the exciting avenues that are there in retail to make the retail experience exciting for audience. Okay, so after this, there is a bit of a theory for you to understand why is it important to, spend a lot of time designing the store itself, because depending on how your layout and then the general ambience of the store looks like, you are able to directly impact your sales. And then not only that, in a very subconscious way, you are sending out messages about your brand to your audience, allowing them to form those impressions or allowing them to reaffirm those impressions about the brand itself. Of course, you're able to better showcase your products, and then your staff are also, of course, operationally for the staff also, it's important that you've taken into account their convenience and operational requirements as well before you can design your store. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of the session. Are there any questions at this point? Are there any questions at this point? So in the next session, we are going to be very closely examining all of these aspects of the store layout. We are going to be looking at different layouts, looking at different case studies and examples under each of these layouts. And this is where, I'm going to be using a lot of videos. I'm going to be using a lot of, images to help you understand these concepts better. Are there any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, let's wind up today's class. I will share these presentations with you. I would urge you to do these exercises in your own time and let me know if you have any questions. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next session. Thank you.